Oh. All right, it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Madeline, and I am the Communications and Programs Manager at the Stigma-Free Society. And today I have Kristen Kelderman with me. Hello, Kristen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Madeline. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Wonderful. So this is one of our rural mental wellness events. And so they're a part of our rural mental wellness toolkit. And so we'll be talking today about Kristen and her experience and her work and the rural mental wellness. So I'm going to start by reading out Kristen's bio. So whoever is watching has a bit of information about who she is. So Kristen grew up on her family dairy farm in Ontario and studied educational science at the University of Guelph, then went back to school and got her master's in psychology and neuroscience in mental health at King's College London in the UK. After struggling with her own mental health and finding help, Kristen began to have more open conversations with others, which has guided her to advocate using social media and helping to reduce stigma. She started a farm group as part of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health Sunrise Challenge and raised over $2,500 for mental health. Amazing. Ultimately, Kristen hopes to live in a world where no one suffers alone, to inspire vulnerability to grow in healthy ways and show love and kindness above all else. Oh, so lovely. So let's start off, Kristen, maybe just if you'd like to tell us anything else about yourself, just kind of introduce yourself in your own words and anything you'd like to say to start us off.
For sure. Thanks, Madeline, for that great background introduction. I think you covered off, most of the highlights of my past 32 years here. But definitely agriculture and farming is something that is a passion of mine and very close to my heart. It's something that has been a part of my life and is a connecting piece through everything that I do, and certainly connects to what you guys do at and have been doing with the Stigma-Free Society and rural mental wellness. So I'm happy to be here. I'm really excited to share my experiences and to hopefully inspire some others to speak out or seek help if that's what you're looking for.
Awesome, wonderful. So, knowing about you, you definitely have a background in agriculture. And so can you tell us a little bit about what drives your passion for agriculture?
Absolutely. Well, I think agriculture is, really in my blood. Growing up on my family farm, that was my life. That was all that I knew. We were literally in the barn, outside with the animals all the time around the farm. And it was an amazing way to grow up. It was an amazing way to see the world and to experience life through, providing food and growing food and kind of what that means and the values that it helped to instill me. And my parents definitely showing myself and my siblings. There was 5 of us on the farm, so there was never a quiet corner or anything. And we always worked as a team and doing chores and whatnot on the farm. So agriculture is definitely in my blood. It is part of my culture. And as I got older and kind of went through those pivotal years in high school of like, what am I going to do with my life and what do I want to be when I grow up? Agriculture, even though it was it's been that connecting piece in my life, it didn't seem like a natural career progression for me at the time. And I had done 4-H. I was very active in my local community with agriculture, and my parents always had us involved in a lot of community events that way. But from a career side, it was actually my dad who suggested, what about going and exploring things at the University of Guelph? And ultimately, that's where I ended up. But I didn't really realize that the world of agriculture was so far beyond what was just on our farm in Napanee. And so for me, agriculture, my passion is for the people in the industry. I have gotten to know some amazing stories, people sharing their circumstances and getting to know them and connecting with them. That's what's really kind of connected with me and sort of brought me along this journey that has me where I am today. There is certainly, you know, a stereotype in agriculture, you know, kind of the rough and tumble farmer, and in our industry, and yet at the end of the day, we're all still human beings trying to connect. We have struggles, and we all have goals that we're trying to achieve. So it's something that is in my heart, and it's never leaving me.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no, that's it's very interesting when you think that we know everything about a topic, and then you can learn so much more about it, and that's really cool that you have that experience. And I'd love to know more just about, so you talked a little bit about your family and your family's farm, but what was it like growing up in rural Ontario, like as a community? You're also talking about how, you know, people in rural communities, agricultural communities, they're all, you know, just human beings like everybody else with needs and with mental health and all of that. I just love to know more about what it was like growing up in a rural community.
Absolutely, for sure. And it's interesting to look back now with the perspective that I have. I've lived on the farm. I've lived in the city that I went to university in Guelph, and now my husband and I are back in kind of around our upbringing area in rural Ontario. And so I would have to say, living on the farm or in a rural community, for me, it was both ordinary and isolating at the same time. In the sense that it was ordinary, you know, it was all I ever knew. That was, the farm was what was everything. You know, my childhood was very blessed, and we got to grow up really close to nature and food and animals, and that was just incredible. I can't imagine anything else. And my parents, you know, they gave us a lot of opportunities to go out and see other things, and they would take us to the city and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the farm, that schedule of milking cows twice a day, that was our regimented routine. And everything else could just kind of fit in around that. So in the way, it was ordinary, but that from that schedule, it can also be very isolating. So, you know, as a young teenage girl growing up on a farm, and I love the farm, I put on my boots, I do chores, everything, but I also really like, you know, to go to the mall with my girlfriends on the weekend. But for me, that was a really different schedule. So if I wanted to do that, my mom would say, okay, well, I can get you to the mall for 9:30, but we have to pick you up by 2:00. So it was always that kind of undercurrent of just feeling a little bit isolated from the rest of my friends. And my friends were all, you know, growing up in Ebony, it's a very rural community. A lot of people lived in the countryside, but in my graduating class of high school, I was one of 3 farm kids. So, you know, even though we had that connection, I still felt a little bit isolated from everybody else. And my friends, you know, they were amazing. They loved to come and visit the farm and come and do chores, which I was like, oh, why would you want to do chores? I want to get out of chores so I can go to the mall. But, you know, for them, it was a novelty. And we always encouraged it. My parents always encouraged that. But it wasn't until I was at university, you know, I found my tribe. I found these people that I really didn't know existed because of that little bit of isolation point. And, you know, from now, throughout my career and what I'm doing now, I've been able to see those challenges from a different perspective and how that impacts our mental health and, you know, and all pieces of our life. And mental health is part of that big sphere of what goes on every day in our lives and on the farm. And now with mental health of that perspective, it's really helped me understand a bit more of the challenges and what we need to overcome and how we can overcome that. Because I do believe that while this is, you know, can be a really heavy topic, we have a lot of really great opportunity.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences. It's very awesome to talk about everyone's different experiences of growing up, you know, on a farm in a rural community. I'm curious, when you were growing up, did you talk about mental health with your family or with your friends? Like, was that a topic that you talked about like isolation and the connection? Yeah, just did you talk about it when you were growing up?
Definitely not. It might have been, if it was perceived as just being like, oh, you're just having an off day, or you're just feeling blah, or you're just lethargic, or, when, stressful times around the farm, if we had a cow, have to be put down or whatever, like we could feel the heaviness of it and we all kind of knew it was there, but nobody was really like acknowledged it in the way that I would prefer to do now, like that I would now. I didn't have the language, I didn't have that understanding, that background. And that's not to say that, we didn't have that support there for when you were feeling bad, but it wasn't an open conversation at all.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. And so you made this shift in your career and like in your life. I'm guessing something happened, right? Because you went to school for ag science, agricultural science, and then you started to study psychology and neuroscience. So did something happen? Like how did that jump happen? Did something happen in between in your personal life, or like what inspired that change?
Well, it's hard for me to understand it even today, as I'm even going through it and living it. It was maybe a little bit of an existential crisis sprinkled with a little bit of crazy over top of it. But at my heart, I am a dreamer, and I like to dream big. And at times that can scare my husband a little bit, but he's really supported me through this transition. And so, yeah, in all seriousness, if I think back to my journey, I think it makes a lot of sense from my background experience. And if we have the time, I'll quickly walk through those steps with you. And I think the first and probably the biggest part of this starts in my childhood. And I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And that was a really big defining moment in my story. It's been something that I've struggled with and something that has impacted my mental health. But it's also something that I'm really starting to understand more and to connect to the other pieces of my life. From there, I moved on with my life, and I was really fortunate. My mom married my dad. And that's when my life on the farm started. And I like to think of this as the start of my childhood because it is the more happier part of my story. And, it's almost like winning the lottery for a kid, getting to move to a farm at 5 years old. And that really connects my agricultural passion and part of my story and journey into this. When I went away to university, my perspective really changed. And so that would be kind of the third part to how I've progressed along here, and to really see the full picture of agriculture and what that looks like, not only just in Ontario, but across the country and from a wider standpoint too. After school, I really enjoyed my career time working in marketing and communications, and I do have a bit of a creative spirit within me, and I really like that. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit to my entrepreneurial side and what was seeing my parents run their own business and whatnot. Right. But I always knew that I would go back to school. I didn't know what I was going to do or when I was going to do it. But in my heart, I always knew that further education was for me. And that's not to say I don't love school. I'm in it right now. I'm almost halfway through my master's, but there was a part of me that knew that this was the path forward for me, and this is what I wanted. And most recently, I would say my struggles with mental health. Kind of taking that trauma and applying it to where I am today. Going to a therapist and speaking openly about it. That's really brought me to this point where I was like, all these things racing around in my brain. And I through the pandemic, as a bit of a pandemic decision, said, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready to go back to school. This is what I want. This is what makes sense. It all kind of clicked and connected in this kind of, a bit of a universal magical way. And I'm exactly where I need to be right now. And I'm so very happy for that. And I'm very blessed as well, as I said, to be going back to school and to be studying and to really have a purpose and a plan for where to take this back to our community, back to our people, and to make a difference in that sector that I love so very, very much. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how I think I can see everything lining out. Living through it, I had no idea that this is where I would be, but I think that's probably par for the course for most of us in life. Things start to click and connect, and when it feels right, I trust my gut, and this feels right for me.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We really value people's lived experience and just sharing that. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we just have open conversations, the less stigma there will be, right? And so I just really want to thank you for sharing that. And I think it's really cool and inspiring that you're taking your experiences and it's guided you on this path where now you can use past experiences, past challenges, and help others apply it to your career and make that connection between agriculture and psychology and neuroscience. I think it's a wonderful connection. That's exactly, the connection that we're trying to make too. So I think that's just really, really wonderful.
For sure. I think we're on to something here.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So I know that now you do, some mental health advocacy, and I know you're very present on social media, and I'd love to hear more about that. And I know you've done some work with the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. Just tell me a bit more about what you've been up to in that regard.
Sure. So the CAMH group that we've been raising money for their Sunrise Challenge, which is going on this week. We're getting up with the sun. I thought it was very fitting for farmers because my dad was like, well, what time do you have to get up at? I'm like, well, I think the sunrise is about 5:38, so I'll set my alarm for 5:30. He's like, I'm up at 4:30. I see every sunrise. I thought that was a nice little connection point. At least for dairy farmers. Not all farmers are like that, but and he chooses to get up that early. But anyways, when I mentioned my husband and I moved back to a rural area, and it's always been important to me to get involved with my local community and to volunteer and give back. But through the pandemic, it's been really difficult to do any sort of like traditional in-person volunteering. And so I was looking around for something. I didn't know what it was, but as I came across CAMH's Sunrise Foundation or Sunrise Challenge through their foundation, I thought, you know what, maybe this is something I can do. And raising money is not something that I am usually really comfortable with. I was always that kid in school that like convinced their mom to buy all the chocolate bars and the cheese because I didn't want to even ask my family for money. But I was like, you know what, let's push your comfort zone a little bit here, Kristen. And so I'm really happy that I did. And to bring together an industry and some key people to help me with that. And so I started the group, and then I reached out to a couple of people, individuals, to ask them to help me out. And they were people that I had known from my time in my career and from speaking out about mental health, and people that I'd really connected with. And so, of course, they were amazing to help with that. And then I also just kind of put it out to anyone to join our group to help raise awareness and money at the end of the day. And so specifically, I just wanted to call out three key individuals. My friends Sandy and Belinda. They are two incredible ag women, and we connected more so after my friend Amy, who she was an incredible woman in agriculture herself as well. And unfortunately, in 2018, we lost her to suicide. And so, in a lot of ways, I see this group as a bit of a tribute to her. And she would have been the first person to cheerlead this initiative as well. And so, when I reached out to Sandy and Belinda, they have kind of created a little bit of a farm brand that they've been building, and they decided to support by doing a t-shirt campaign. So they sold out on their first round of t-shirts. I think very, very quickly within the first day. It was incredible. And I think that really speaks to our community. So even though we may not be out there voicing our opinions on mental health, every day. Obviously, people are busy and they have other jobs too. They're willing to support these initiatives. And anyone who I personally asked as well, or sent a message out to say, hey, I'm doing this challenge. Can you give $5? Can you give $10? And people were so generous. I like it. Every time I got an email, my heart filled up and I was so appreciative. Because it felt like that recognition that we've been working for in the mental health space all along, and people saying, it's giving and donating. It was just incredible. And so Sandy and Belinda were a key part of that. And I'm very thankful for them. They sold another $600 worth of t-shirts. So just amazing. And to update everyone too, I went on this morning to check what our fundraising number is right now. And we are at $3,725. So
amazing.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. One other key person that I wanted to just give a quick call out to, and I was also connected to Janine through my friend Amy, and she works with farmers across Ontario with our OFA, or Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and advocates for mental health on her own personal time too, and has shared her story and her struggle as well. And so Janine was an incredible and continues to be an incredible support and friend for me as well. And so I hope that with this group we can continue to do more. This is just the very first little step, and it's incredible to see how our industry and our people have stepped up. So yeah.
Oh yeah, sounds like you have an amazing network and support system there. That's really encouraging to hear. Do you think that you've noticed, now that you're back in the rural community and you've been doing this work, have you been noticing a shift? Like, have you noticed that people have been talking a bit more about mental health, or is it still? I'm sure there's still work to be done, but have you noticed any difference?
In my personal connections, yes, absolutely. I would say people are getting there. They're getting a little bit more comfortable, just saying, even just something like, I'm struggling, or I'm having a hard time, or one of my neighbors here, we've gotten to know him through my dog and his dog. They've become best friends, which has been really great. And that's something that I really missed about rural culture, is just, you walk up the trail and you meet someone and you chit chat for half an hour and the dogs play, and it's just been incredible. But he's a retired man, and I've gotten to know him quite well. And unfortunately, he had to rehome his dog. And so I've still continued to stop in and say hello and just check in on him. But, I know he's hurting, because that's a really personal, emotional loss. I would feel the exact same way. And so just the other day I asked him, I'm like, how are you? He's like, you know what? It just sucks. And it just kind of like hit me in the heart a little bit. And I was like, you know what, Dan, like, it does. It really sucks. And just being there for someone, that connection, that rural connection again. He was struggling, and I didn't have to fix anything. I was just there to support him and just to be a bit of a sounding board and a listening ear. And so, I would say that's, just one little example in my very small world, but we're starting to see some change. We're starting to see a little bit of attitude shift, but at the same time, I know that there's still a lot of work to be done. I still talk to some friends and family members about things, and they're kind of interested, but they're not really comfortable yet. So just keeping. I think this is a long haul, right? We're getting there, but we've got a long way to go still.
No, I love your approach of just building that community and just being there for people and just holding space for people, because I think you made a really good point about we can be there for each other and we don't have to try to fix each other's situations. We don't have to come up with a solution, but we can just be there and sit with someone. And I think that's just really wonderful that you're doing that in your own community. And I think we can all learn from that for sure.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're doing all this amazing advocacy and this work in your community. And I'm wondering how it has affected your own mental health, your mental health journey.
Yeah, that's, I think that's a continuing, ongoing process for me, and it will be my entire life. It has been this whole time. My mental health journey, I think everyone's begins in childhood and progresses, whatever situations you've faced or whatnot, continues. Personally, my journey, I mentioned I was born into a family. It was a very dark place. It was an unhealthy environment, and I experienced trauma, and shame and guilt kind of comes right along with that. And it's ridden, shotgun in my life, my whole entire 32 years. I was very young when I experienced my trauma, and thankfully I was saved. My mom, she is the most courageous person I know. She made the decision for a better life for her and for her kids. And I know that wasn't an easy one. I know that she has her own struggles with that. But she was just very courageous, and she made the decision to move forward for herself. And thankfully, she was granted full custody of her children. And as I mentioned, when my mom remarried my dad, that was just the kid lottery. It was incredible. From that point on, I would consider my life to be a really good life, a really normal life. But at the time, I didn't really understand how trauma continues with you. No matter how, I knew that was part of my story. It was part that I felt a lot of guilt and shame. I didn't have the language for it as a young child, or even, all the way up until probably my late 20s. That was, something that I suppressed. I ran away from it. I avoided, every possible tactic to just not feel it. And that was a big part of my struggle more recently. And, when we lost my friend Amy to suicide, that was really hard. It was a grief and loss that I never knew I could know. The first time I learned about suicide, I was actually in grade 8. I remember it very vividly. It's a very vivid memory in my imagination where our teacher, she had shared with us that she had lost someone that she was very close to in university to suicide. And I remember just not really understanding at the time. I was like, how could that affect you so much? Like, why that? And when we lost Amy, that grief, it internalized in me, and all that trauma that I had been running from for so long just came right to the forefront. And it was a really hard time in my life because we had just lost my friend, and I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know how to cope. Amy was like a big sister to me in a lot of ways. She was an incredible woman. She was a loving mother, and she was a light for so many people. And just not having the tools, not knowing where to go, I internalized all of that. And then I internalized my trauma. And it was just a really hard and dark time. I definitely, looking back now, can see the patterns and see, that I was being very reckless. I was being very selfish. I was angry, and I didn't know how to process any of my emotions. I could see that I was starting to kind of circle towards the bottom, but I was also really good at pushing that away and to be like, no, I'm fine. I'll just fill my day, or I'll just, keep busy, or, go out with my girlfriends, or just like distract. Yeah. And again, just like we can't outrun our trauma, right? And so it came down to a really hard conversation with my now husband, where I realized that, hey, I have to do this for me, and I have to figure out what I want my future to look like. And in that moment, I knew I had to change. And I was very, very hesitant, but also very fortunate to have found therapy. And it wasn't easy. It was a really hard time. Again, it wasn't like, boom, okay, I'm starting therapy, I'm feeling better, life is getting better. These things, they take time. And there were times, after every single session, I would walk out of the office, and on my way to my car, I would either still have tears in my eyes or be crying, or I would get to my car and cry. And I just remember there being such a weight on me, and thinking like, how is this even helping me right now? But again, not having that language, therapy forced me to have some of those hard conversations and answer some of those hard questions that I've been running from my entire life. My entire 32 years of avoidance came down to these sessions, and the perspective that I was able to get and to understand, like, hey, if I want my life to be like this is what I have to do. And so I could probably go on a lot longer with my mental health journey, but that was kind of my true turning point in how I started to seek help. And that, was a process of probably 6 or 8 months before I actually started to feel like myself again. And that was prior to probably at least 6 months of just like being in a total tailspin and not knowing what's going on. So it was a very insightful time. And it was a point in my life that is hard to share, but I know it's important to share. And I think it's also maybe important to point out at this point that, everyone's mental health journey is different. Some people seek and find help in therapy. Some people don't. They don't have the same experiences, and that everyone's issues are complex, and that you don't really ever know what someone else is going through, because through that whole probably year and a half of my life, there were very few people who knew what was going on, or maybe they suspected, but they never actually reached out or asked. And so I guess my point to that is to just give everyone a little bit of grace, because you never really know what their internal struggle is.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I just want to just hold space for just how honest and vulnerable you've been able to be. And I just really appreciate it. And I know that the viewers who are going to watch this are really going to appreciate it too, because you know, we don't always talk about the nitty-gritty and the hard things. And you know, yeah, trauma is complex, and it doesn't get better overnight. So I really appreciate you sharing those really hard things that you've had to go through. And yeah, I just really appreciate it.
Thanks, Melanie.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for holding that space.
Yeah. And I just want, I'm just very happy that you have been working through that, and now you can be this voice for people who may not, you know, be able to talk about it. And I just think that it's just very impactful. Yeah. I was wondering.
I know.
Yeah. Just as we close up, I know we could definitely talk for longer, and I really love hearing about your story. But as we close out today, I was just wondering if you have any just any messages of hope. You have mentioned some, but just for people who are watching who may be in a similar space that you were in when you started this most recent journey, and just any advice that you might have.
Absolutely. I think the first thing is that there always is hope, right? I am an internal optimist, and sometimes that gets the better of me, because I know, you know, these conversations, these struggles that we all have, you know, they are heavy, they are not light, and you know, it can be really difficult to go through a dark time and understand that there is an opportunity beyond this for you, for everyone, that there are ways that you can improve, that your life can improve, and that, you know, it's not going to be easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It is not, you know, there are no quick fixes when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I tried all of the avoidance mechanisms possible. And at the end of the day, you choose you, and you choose to live, and you choose to put yourself forward, because without you, without your own self-support, it can be really difficult, if not impossible, to move through that space. And so I would absolutely say that there's always hope. Maybe a bit more concrete of tips and advice that I would say, especially for those people who may be a bit more isolated, working in a rural community or on a farm, you know, to find your support system. And a lot of people often default to like, oh, my support system is my family. And it doesn't, it can be, it absolutely can be, but it doesn't always have to be. And maybe in some instances, if you're working on the farm with your family, maybe it shouldn't be your family. Maybe you need a little bit of space to vent, or to, you know, be truthfully, you know, honest, and, you know, look for those support systems in your life, whether that's a friend, it's other farmers, it's a support group, And it can also be a therapist or a professional doctor too. Whatever that looks like for you, I think that's a really key point that I would emphasize. And then outside of that, I found a lot, personally, I have found a lot of growth through introspection. So looking within yourself. And, oftentimes, I think it's often taken for granted that, oh, well, I know myself, I know who I am. We all know ourselves best, right? But taking the time to sit and spend some time in your own headspace, it can be an enlightening journey. It can also be a little bit terrifying, depending on who you are. But for me, that's really been a key step in my personal growth through mental health, has been introspection and to finding what matters to you. So, life is busy and life is complicated, but everyone is unique and everyone has unique priorities through life. And so finding what those core values are to you and holding them onto them for dear life. So when you are going through those hard times and you can say, you know what, my core values are courage and love. And that's what I'm going to get through this. If you can boil it down to those two things, that's what you can hold on to. And I would say, just trying to find those core values for yourself can be life-saving at times. And then I guess my last quick little message would be, in this mental health space, there's a lot of people talking about it. There's a lot of, advice that people give, and it can get overwhelming. If you're anything like me, when I start something new, I'm all in. And so I'm like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to get that and I'm going to buy this and I'm going to, just try to pile everything on.
I'm definitely like that.
Right? It's so easy to fall into that trap. And, for real, lasting, life-changing, routine-changing things, we know that from a psychological background, small incremental changes, that's what makes a difference. So trying to not overwhelm yourself with going all in right away. Try one thing, see if it works. If it doesn't, move on to the next. If it does, okay, great. How can you do more of that? How can you, just kind of build that into that automated routine, and to let everything else, it doesn't matter if you don't meditate every day or you don't, you eat McDonald's for lunch or whatever that looks like for you, whatever your own personal mental health journey is, make it so that it's customizable for you and not someone else's pre-stamped routine. So those would be kind of my key tips and advice.
Thank you. Those are really great tips. I think I'm learning from you, and I think anyone watching will learn very beautiful words of wisdom. So I really appreciate that. And just thank you so much for being on this event today. And it was my pleasure to interview you and just hear your story. And I'm just very glad that it worked out like this. So thank you so much. And anybody watching, thank you for watching. This will also be posted on our Facebook and YouTube, so you can watch it again afterwards.
Awesome. Well, Melanie, I would really like to thank you for your time, for your insightful questions, and for everything that you guys do as well. I think that's such a key change in our culture and our society, is to have organizations like yours making a true change and having conversations like this, right? Mental health can seem overwhelming, but at the end of the day, we're just having a conversation. And so we can change our mental health one conversation at a time.
I love that. Awesome. All right. Goodbye, everyone watching.
Bye, guys.